legend in the CIA. He was the only member, he was the only CIA member there, but of course he was the one that was laying out the plan.
Who was William King Harvey? Chauncey was well aware of his involvement in other CIA operations.
William King Harvey was the head of Task Force W. That had been renamed. Originally, that was a part of a ZR rifle operation called ZR Rifle. ZR Rifle was nothing more than an assassination group that went around the world assassinating people. And Harvey happened to be the head of ZR Rifle.
On December 14, 1961, top echelon leaders of the CIA and the Mafia met at Bermuda Dunes Airport in Palm Springs to discuss ground rules for Operation Mongoose. Chauncey's memos from that meeting show an executive action was planned. Executive action means assassination. The target, the Beard, Castro. The ground rules, CIA only, maximum security, non-attributability, plausible denial, need-to-know basis. Harvey set the tone of the meeting at the Bermuda Dunes Airport.
They were going to eliminate the Beard and how it was going to be done, and what, just starting as to what personnel they were going to hire. First of all, they were trying to decide what cryptonym they were going to use for this, because they had decided that they would assign it a cryptonym and it would end up in the official CIA files. AM, normally operations involving Cuba had an AM start to their cryptonym. So we said, well, we don't want to use AM. What are we going to use? They started looking down the list, and MO was some cryptonym for some obscure place way out in the Pacific somewhere. So we said, hey, that would be a good, use MO. And somebody said, well, what goes with MO? And so it flows, you know. So somebody said, hey, how about Mongoose? You know, the mongoose never loses, you know. That's a good one, you know. Everybody agreed, just, hey, we'll call it Operation Mongoose.
It's also decided any further discussions about Operation Mongoose would be face-to-face, nothing in writing. The CIA's William King Harvey was clearly in charge.
It was a very short meeting because of the fact that
20 minutes an hour?
Yeah, 20 minutes an hour. It didn't take very long. I mean, he laid it out in precise terms. These guys wanted to get out, you know, and you know, take on off. And guys like Giancana and Rosselli, I mean, they're reluctant, you know, to get together. These and Ligavoli too. These high-ranking mobsters don't like to meet with each other, and rarely do they. So we kept it short and sweet, and that was it.
An August 14th, 1962 inter-office CIA memo from William King Harvey to the Director of Clandestine Operations says, in part, our contract agents in Miami and Los Angeles have been assured by me that no reference to this operation appears in our central files.
Our first order of business was to set up a documentation mill. So we started looking around for a plant, and we found one that was ideal, and it was in financial trouble. It was called the Los Angeles Stamp and Stationery Company. It was a very old LA firm that owned a very valuable building in downtown Los Angeles, which was ideally set up because what we could do, the first 4 floors of this building was devoted to legitimate business. We went right on with their printing. They printed, they did banners, they did badges, they did high quality printing such as stock certificates, bonds, that sort of thing. But more importantly in that which for us was the fact that they made police badges for just about every police department in the United States. And then the top floor was devoted to our clandestine operations. So we had a group of employees that knew nothing about what went on upstairs. But upstairs we did all the disinformation stuff, all the fake IDs, and that sort of thing.
The agency also wanted a machine shop to handle weapon modifications.
We discovered this place at Goleta, which is California, which is at the Santa Barbara airport. So there again, it was located on the airport, so we could land there, taxi in, pull right in. We had a big hangar, just pull right into that facility, which is great, you know, for loading and unloading arms and that sort of thing. And there again, this was an operating machine shop that continued its own work. But when we came along, we said, hey, we want 500 silencers. We got 500 silencers.
By late 1962, both covert operations were up and running. Both were used by the mob and the CIA. Holt's immediate supervisor on behalf of the agency was Phil Twombly.
Philip Twombly had been at one time the executive vice president for Caribbean operations of Coca-Cola, which used to boast that it was the eyes and ears of the CIA in the Caribbean. So we know that he was well connected. We never actually knew how well until we came to the West Coast, and we were told that all of our funds would be coming from Philip Twombly. And all of our orders would be coming from Philip Twombly and a longtime agent by the name of Richard Wilson. The head of the CIA in Los Angeles was a guy by the name of Ernst Leibacher. And we were told that except in an extreme emergency, we were not to contact Leibacher, that our operations were outside the normal loop of the CIA. So suddenly, I mean, at first we had no trouble setting up all these things, but then we started making requests for capital equipment that we felt that we needed, and it had just slowed to a trickle for some reason. I mean, we just weren't getting any funds.
But suddenly, in early 1963, the purse strings loosened.
We're not talking about piddly little procurements. We're talking about big ticket items. Among them was we wanted a corporate jet to fly back and forth in a fast we wanted to get and the best one at that time was the Gulfstream, which was a turboprop job. The startling thing about it was they were telling us, hey, we got money. At the end of '63, at the end of April in '63, I received a note from Philip Twombly, in which he said that we would soon be receiving a special order from our distributor in New Orleans.
A letter from Twombly dated April 29, 1963, is addressed to Jack Moon, Chauncey's favorite alias. I want you to personally supervise this project and make the delivery yourself to New Orleans. It's signed, regards, Phil.
Our distributor in New Orleans happened to be Guy Bannister, who is a well-known person, known to all the assassination researchers, because he was a very mysterious guy and was probably Lee Harvey Oswald's control.
Twombly's letter to Chauncey Holt, a.k.a. Jack Moon, ended with this instruction: the customer wants all the original artwork destroyed when the job is completed.
bothered me from day one was the vilification of Lee Harvey Oswald, because I know that Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. I know that he was executed just the same as everyone else.
Chauncey is absolutely convinced that Oswald was framed.
Although my revelations probably won't add too much to what's already been said, but all I wanted to do was to, I felt that the American people are entitled to know.
The editing for the next portion of the Holt interview will be minimal. You will hear Chauncey Holt's words as he spoke them. He's talking about his New Orleans assignment. It's late spring, 1963.
It turned out that this work was for Lee Harvey Oswald. We did documentation, identity documents in the name of Lee Harvey Oswald, Lee Henry Oswald, Leon Osborne, and Alex Heidel. We weren't sure at the time who were actually doing it, who this person was, for the simple reason that the same picture that appeared on Lee Harvey Oswald also appeared on Leon Osborne. So we didn't know whether this guy was actually Leon Osborne or that, or he might have been neither. So we didn't know exactly who this was. So we delivered some of this documentation was redoing some other documentation that someone else had done, and it was very amateurish and wouldn't pass muster. If you looked at it very closely, you'd know it was a forgery. So it was merely cleaning it up. Some of it was new. One of the new things that we did for him was to show a card showing that Lee Harvey Oswald was a member of the Communist Party. Well, that presented a little problem for us because I didn't even know what that card looked like, and we hunted and hunted and hunted trying to find what it looked like, and we were finally told by experts that, hey, those communists don't carry any cards, but they wanted it, so we just had to wing it and make them a nice looking card that showed him a member of the Communist Party. So we completed that in May or June. In August, we made a trip to New Orleans to deliver some guns and so forth. I had a note. We had a note from George Reynolds. George Reynolds operated 4 proprietary interests at Morgan City, Louisiana, and he relayed. He was a high level. Apparently, he operated a high level because a lot of instructions came from him, and a lot of money came from him. A lot of money came from his organization direct to whomever I said send it to. So he worked at a high level. Besides, he was extremely well connected to the intelligence community. His sister was married to Frank Belcher, who was one of the most powerful figures, legal figures in California. Now, Frank Belcher was partners with Joe Ball, not actually partners in their law firm. They had separate law firms, but they operated together.
Joe Ball, like Belcher, was an influential legal figure. He was president of the California State Bar and gained national exposure as a senior counsel to the Warren Commission. According to Chauncey, both Belcher and Ball were part of an interlocked web with far-reaching connections. Chauncey elaborates further about this shadowy network.
George Reynolds had a brother whose name was Bob Reynolds. He was chief of station at J.M. Wave, and he was a high-level CIA individual, employee. Besides, Frank Belcher was related to J.A. Belcher of J.A. Belcher Oil Company. They had old-time oil money from Texas. He also was known to be a CIA asset. It was well known, and so all these things were working together. So I get a letter from George Reynolds telling me that he and Leroy Young, who happened to be his second in command, he was a weapons expert, helicopter pilot, you know, soldier of fortune type, and that they were going to be in New Orleans for about a 20-day period, and I was going to New Orleans to deliver some guns to Louis McWillie, who was a high-level high-level organized crime figure. All these people, of course, were connected to the CIA. CIA knew what was going on. So I was going to deliver these guns over there. So while I was there, and I had some stuff for Guy Bannister, he sent me this note stating he was going to be there and that he was going to be at the LaSalle Hotel and to meet a guy by the name of Thomas Eli Davis. Thomas Davis, he was another one of those soldier of fortune types that worked for the CIA. So while we was over there on the 9th day of August in '63, I had never seen Oswald. So I was down talking to Guy Bannister, and he said, well, Oswald was over on the next street handing out leaflets, so why don't I go over and take a look at him? I don't have to introduce myself, but, you know, go and at least I'd see him. So I went over, and it turned out that Lee Harvey Oswald and a guy named Carlos Bringuier got into a shoving match there, and they both ended up getting arrested, actually for nothing really. So I went back over, and Guy Bannister said, well, you know, I guess we should go down and get Oswald, bail him out, and so forth. But before we could bail him out, Oswald's uncle, Dutch Moretz, worked for Carlos Marcello. So they sent a guy down to get him out of jail. He was fine. And that was on a Friday. And on Monday, he was to appear in night court. I went down to night court to just see what was going on, and they gave and talked to him. And I talked to him for a while, and they gave him a little fine, and he left.
That was your first?
That was the first time I saw Oswald.
In night court?
Yeah, that's first. Well, I saw him, but the first time I introduced myself to him, you know, went up and said who I was and so forth, and talked to him for a while. And he was an interesting kid to talk to. You know, he'd just turned 24. Well, he wasn't even 24 then. He was 23 then. He didn't turn 24 until October. But we had an interesting little talk, and then on Friday, he was back in front of the Trade Mart handing out leaflets again. I happened to be in the Trade Mart talking to a guy by the name of Lloyd Cobb. Lloyd Cobb, they called him the Potato Man because he owned 8,000 acres of potatoes up around Jackson, Louisiana. He was as far right-wing as you can get, and he was very, very high up. Those guys at the Trade Mart, John Lawrence may have been the president of the Trade Mart, and Clay Shaw may have been the director, but they all took their orders from Lloyd Cobb. So I went in, and just as I came out of the building, I look, and there's a television camera there taking pictures of WSDU was there taking pictures of this little handing out these pamphlets. Well, I just ducked down the side, and I thought I wasn't caught on film, but it turned out that I was.
A television news crew was outside the International Trade Mart and captured on film Oswald passing out "Fair Play for Cuba" protest leaflets. Transferred to stills, it clearly shows Oswald at work. From a different angle, you see bystanders reading the leaflets. In this still taken from the film, Oswald's head is turned away from the camera. And from another still, Chauncey, in sunglasses, is seen exiting the Trade Mart building. He's on the far right. On Chauncey's left, Leroy Young, George Reynolds' assistant.
Well, all this stuff really concerned Philip Twombly.
Twombly resolved the problem of Chauncey being identified on that news film with the help of New Orleans FBI agent Warren DeBruze. The disinformation campaign worked, as Twombly wrote Chauncey. "Dear Jack, the Potato Man advised our distributor in New Orleans that Warren has submitted a report and has positively identified the man coming out of the Trade Mart as the public relations man, not Chauncey." Again, the distributor in New Orleans was Guy Bannister.
Lloyd Cobb was able to pull all these strings and had them misidentified by employees of the Trade Mart that he was their boss, and so we managed to extricate ourselves from that possibility. I couldn't understand is why that they were so worried about it, and why that they were doing so much with it. Had so much interest in Oswald. Oswald was an interesting kid, but to try to say that they were trying to separate us from the Fair Play for Cuba act and didn't want us involved and so forth, indicated clearly to me, or didn't then, but later on, I got the idea as, hey, this guy was important to them, and later on I understood why, because they undoubtedly had other plans for him, and the fact that this inquiry was initiated by Philip Twombly indicated to me that Twombly was cognizant of these plans that were in the works.
About the same time of the New Orleans episode with Oswald, Chauncey received an unusual order from a Texas gun dealer.
In the summer of 1963, we received an order, I guess you'd call it an order, or a request from a gunsmith in Dallas by the name of John T. Mason, spelled with an E, and asking us to buy all the existing models of the Mannlicher Carcano rifle. The Mannlicher Carcano was an Italian-made military rifle, probably the poorest made military rifle that was ever designed. They called it the Mannlicher. The name of Mannlicher shouldn't even been on it. Mannlicher was a great Austrian gunmaker, but the only thing that he had anything to do with the Mannlicher Carcano was that he designed the magazine. But they said, buy these existing, buy these guns. They had us doing a lot of chronograph work on them, measuring muzzle velocity and that sort of thing, using all kinds of loads, underloading, overloading, and so forth. And that's a normal sort of thing. We bought these rifles from Sam Cummins, who had another CIA front over at Western Surplus out on Arroyo Seco in Pasadena. We bought these things for $3 a piece. This would give you an idea what kind of a gun these were. So you'd be better off with a bow and arrow. So then they sent us a bunch of the Manley, the one particular Carcano shot a 6.5 millimeter used bullet, and we received a bunch of 6.5 Manley Carcano bullets. At first glance, if you look at them at first glance, you think that they're unfired, that they're new bullets just cast. But if you examine them very carefully, you could see that they had been fired at least once, and they had been fired into either water or a wadding or something, so they didn't get just formed, you know, formed out of shape, distorted, or whatever you want to call it. Then they asked us to load a number of these into a 264 Remington case. 264 and 6.5 are the same. But however, the Remington, I mean, you can use that from a quality sniper's rifle, such as a Remington 700, one of those. I mean, instead of sticking with that cheap Carcano. So it's obviously these people who do this have something in mind. So we loaded a lot of those cases. We also loaded cases for them, what they call Mexican loads. Mexican loads are, you take, in this case, we took a 308 case and we necked it down so that it would take the 6.5, and then we put the 6.5 in it, and of course this would could be fired from a 308. And there's a lot of good 308s around. As a matter of fact, the M14, which was the top flight military rifle at that time, used the 308. However, the only drawback in that, of course, is the fact of firing that small projectile out of a lot. You don't know where the hell it's going. I mean, you certainly know you're going to deliver it somewhere, but you can't be sure of hitting anything. So it's apparent that Masons, they've got something going there. So we produced all that stuff and delivered it to him in the summer of 1963.
On April 23, 1963, the first news release came out concerning President Kennedy's trip to Dallas.
What happened at that time, Kennedy himself was, on the one hand, he was talking about having a big speech before the 2506 Brigade, saying this is going to be delivered, this flag is going to be delivered to a free Cuba, we'll never let up, and blah, 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 all that political rhetoric, when in fact his emissary, William Atwood, was at that time negotiating with Raul Castro to ease up on some of the restrictions and build up improve the relationship with the United States. Well, I mean, this is not what the CIA wants to hear. So what they decided to do was they were going to create this disturbance, and which was probably an attempt on the life of the president, or a seemingly attempt on his life, that would be laid to the door of the pro-Castro Cubans. That way, it would inject a little life back into their program. So that was what we were told. So as part of our role in it was going to be was that we were going to forge a lot of identification, Secret Service identification. Not only the cards that they carry, but the lapel pins that they wear. The problem in this, of course, is the fact that they change that lapel every 2 or 3 days. Of course, the only person who would actually know would be another Secret Service agent. I mean, I'd look at it, I wouldn't know, you wouldn't know, but they thought it was important enough to, hey, to have the real thing. So we were waiting on this before we could make our delivery to Dallas.
Chauncey was to deliver the fake Secret Service identification to Dallas. But even before Dallas, the president had been scheduled to speak in Miami. However, the Secret Service got wind of an assassination plot against the president in that Florida city.
We prepared some stuff for the Miami thing, which was supposed to take place on November the 9th.
This incident.
Yeah, this incident. And we provided the same type of identification as we did for Dallas. The only problem is that they intercepted a telephone conversation that indicated that there was going to be an attempt on Kennedy's life, and they didn't have the motorcade. They took him directly to where he was going to speak by helicopter and returned him by helicopter, and they had to cancel that operation. So we were waiting for the second one, which was going to be in Dallas, because it seemed that was going to be a viable project. And we were waiting for the word from Twombly what the color of the identification badges were going to be for that particular day. That was the only